Hello, this is Jeff Morgan. You are listening to an authorized audio version of The Age of Post-Scarcity, Volume 1. If this material is interesting to you and you'd like to continue, you're welcome to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also find my other books on Amazon Kindle, where I publish both fiction and nonfiction exploring similar themes. Thank you for listening.
Chapter 3, Zero-Point Energy, Power from the Quantum Vacuum. When energy is no longer scarce, civilization is no longer constrained. Introduction. Energy has always defined the trajectory of civilization. From the first controlled fire to the fusion reactors on the horizon, the story of humanity is the story of energy transformation. Each leap in access to energy has reshaped societies, redrawn political boundaries, and redefined what it means to live, work, and thrive. As Václav Smil notes in Energy and Civilization, a history, the rise of agriculture, cities, and machines has always depended on humanity's ability to capture and direct more concentrated forms of energy. Yet energy has also been the site of struggle. Scarcity has turned power into property and energy into empire. The very systems designed to fuel growth have created vast asymmetries in wealth, mobility, and opportunity. In the fossil fuel era, these asymmetries became global. As Daniel Yergin documents in The Prize, the epic quest for oil, money, and power, 20th century geopolitics was driven by access to oil fields, pipeline routes, and strategic reserves. Nations rose and fell based on their energy supply. Wars were fought, economies manipulated, and ecosystems sacrificed in the pursuit of fuel. Meanwhile, billions were left in darkness. As Benjamin Sovacool argues in Energy, Poverty, and Development, energy poverty remains one of the most persistent forms of structural exclusion in the modern world, limiting access to education, healthcare, and economic mobility. At the same time, fossil energy has pushed the planet to the brink. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change makes it clear that the continued combustion of coal, oil, and gas is incompatible with ecological stability. Global warming, ocean acidification, and biodiversity loss are all accelerated by our dependence on carbon-intensive energy systems. In this context, clean energy is not simply a technical preference. It is a planetary imperative. Even the cleanest alternatives, including solar, wind, geothermal, and hydroelectric, remain bound by physical limits, geographic constraints, and intermittent availability. Batteries must be charged. Grids must be built. Materials must be mined. What if energy itself could be reimagined not as something to be extracted or stored, but as something already present, everywhere, always? Zero-point energy suggests that this is not fantasy. It is physics. As Richard Feynman explains in the Feynman Lectures on Physics, even the vacuum of space, devoid of matter and light, is filled with fluctuations and latent energy due to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. This zero-point field is a seething backdrop of motion and possibility, a kind of quantum ether that pervades all space-time. The Casimir effect, observed in laboratory experiments, confirms that this energy has measurable consequences, exerting force between uncharged metal plates suspended in vacuum. If this energy can be tapped, and researchers such as Harold Puthoff and Mark Millis believe that it can, then every device, vehicle, building, and system could be powered without combustion, without pollution, and without centralized infrastructure. Such a breakthrough would not simply augment our energy economy. It would eliminate the need for it. As Michio Kaku writes in The Future of Humanity, zero-point energy could enable deep space travel, autonomous habitats, and the end of resource-based geopolitics. But with such abundance comes the need for a new ethic. As Buckminster Fuller warned in Critical Path, technological power without design intelligence risks reproducing the same cycles of conflict and waste that define the fossil age. In a world where energy is infinite, the most valuable resource becomes wisdom. Energy no longer needs to be managed for scarcity. It must be stewarded for meaning. This chapter explores zero-point energy not only as a scientific possibility, but as a civilizational pivot. It traces its quantum foundations, examines current research, and imagines its application across transportation, housing, environmental restoration, and interstellar travel. It also considers the risks of misuse and the philosophical implications of energy no longer bound by struggle. If zero-point energy is real, then we stand on the edge of a transformation as profound as the harnessing of fire or the splitting of the atom. What we choose to power with it will define who we become. The central role of energy in civilization. Energy is not a peripheral convenience of modern life. It is the substrate of civilization itself. Every human system, including agriculture, transportation, manufacturing, communication, and shelter, has developed through the harnessing of increasingly dense and efficient energy sources. The story of civilization is, in many respects, a story of energy revolutions. From fire to fossil fuels, each leap in energy access has reorganized the structures of society, enabling greater complexity, productivity, and reach. The earliest human communities survived by harnessing the caloric energy of fire and the kinetic energy of muscle. Domesticated animals, water wheels, and windmills marked the transition to mechanical power, allowing early agricultural and industrial systems to expand beyond what human bodies could achieve alone. As Václav Smil describes in Energy and Civilization, a history, the first real energy transformation came with the Industrial Revolution, when coal and later oil fueled machines that displaced centuries of manual labor and reshaped both urban and rural life. This era marked the birth of energy as infrastructure, not simply as fuel. The advent of fossil fuels created both unprecedented growth and unprecedented dependence. Oil, coal, and natural gas powered the 20th century, enabling global transportation networks, mass production, and the digital economy. Yet they also brought geostrategic conflict, economic volatility, and ecological crisis. The rise of petrostates and the entrenchment of energy monopolies made access to power a driver of international politics. Daniel Yergin, in The Prize, the epic quest for oil, money, and power, chronicles how wars, coups, and empires have hinged on access to energy resources, often at staggering human and environmental cost. Even nuclear energy, which promised near limitless power during the mid-20th century, introduced new constraints. Though it produces high energy density, it also generates radioactive waste, requires centralized infrastructure, and presents risks of catastrophic failure. As Spencer Weir details in The Rise of Nuclear Fear, the public perception of nuclear energy has been shaped by disasters, such as Chernobyl and Fukushima, limiting its social and political viability despite its technical efficiency. The consequences of energy scarcity remain visible in the 21st century. Billions still lack reliable access to electricity. According to the International Energy Agency, nearly 770 million people globally live without consistent power, a condition that restricts access to education, healthcare, and economic opportunity. Energy poverty is not merely an inconvenience. It is a structural form of exclusion. In Energy, Poverty, and Development, Benjamin Sovacool argues that the absence of affordable and sustainable energy systems perpetuates cycles of poverty and inequality, especially in rural and post-colonial contexts. Scarcity also drives environmental collapse. Fossil fuel combustion remains the leading cause of greenhouse gas emissions, contributing directly to climate change, air pollution, and biodiversity loss. As the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change emphasizes, limiting global temperature rise depends on the rapid decarbonization of energy systems and the adoption of sustainable alternatives. Without abundant clean energy, Every other global goal, including water access, food security, and climate stabilization, remains out of reach. In this context, energy abundance becomes the foundation of post-scarcity civilization. Unlike other resources, energy is the enabler of access. It powers the systems that grow food, purify water, build homes, and transport medicine. It underlies the functionality of artificial superintelligence, the processes of matter replication, the propulsion of anti-gravity systems, and the infrastructure of teleportation. As Buckminster Fuller once observed, the more effectively we harness energy, the more we can decouple human flourishing from resource extraction. To imagine a world beyond scarcity, one must begin with energy. When it is abundant, decentralized, and clean, everything else becomes possible. Food becomes a function of energy input, not soil availability. Water becomes an engineering problem, not a geographic constraint. Shelter becomes a design challenge, not a competition for land. The key to social and ecological liberation lies not only in what we power, but in how we imagine the meaning of power itself. What is zero-point energy? Zero-point energy refers to the underlying quantum field energy that persists in a vacuum even when all classical energy has been removed. It is not speculative mysticism, but a theoretical consequence of modern quantum mechanics. Within quantum field theory, the vacuum is not empty. It teems with continuous fluctuations, virtual particles, and probabilistic motion. These phenomena emerge directly from the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which states that the precise values of position and momentum cannot simultaneously be known. This inherent uncertainty ensures that no particle can ever be completely at rest, even in its lowest possible energy state. A system exhibits motion. As Richard Feynman describes in the Feynman Lectures on Physics, this ceaseless activity means that even empty space is filled with latent energy. One of the most important experimental confirmations of zero-point energy is the Casimir effect, first predicted by Dutch physicist Hendrik Casimir in 1948. When two uncharged, parallel metal plates are placed in a vacuum a few microns apart, they experience a measurable attraction. This force does not arise from any external source, but from the imbalance in quantum vacuum fluctuations between the inner and outer regions of the plates. As Julian Schwinger and his collaborators explain in Classical Electrodynamics, the Casimir effect is considered direct evidence that the quantum vacuum contains real energy with physical consequences. The implications of this vacuum energy are staggering. Unlike conventional energy sources, zero-point energy does not rely on combustion, depletion, or mass conversion. It exists everywhere in the universe and is theoretically present at every point in space-time. As Hal Puthoff describes in his analysis of vacuum fluctuations and energy extraction, zero-point energy is embedded in the very fabric of quantum fields and could, under the right conditions, be accessed as a limitless energy source. The field is not without controversy, but the theoretical foundations are well-grounded in accepted physics. This form of energy differs profoundly from all prior human conceptions of fuel. It does not require fuel to be burned or particles to be split. It does not involve chemical reactions or electromagnetic induction. Instead, it reflects a latent property of the quantum vacuum, which exists uniformly and ubiquitously. As Michio Kaku notes in The Future of Humanity, zero-point energy represents an ideal form of energy: clean, silent, omnipresent, and non-depleting. Even in deep interstellar space, where light is rare and temperature nears absolute zero, zero-point energy remains. This universality makes it uniquely suited for advanced propulsion, off-world colonization, and the decentralization of energy infrastructure. Its presence is not determined by climate, geography, or mineral access. It is a property of existence itself. Paul Davies, in The Cosmic Blueprint, argues that zero-point energy could represent a deeper order in nature, potentially offering insights not only into energy systems, but into the origin of structure and form in the universe. Despite its promise, the extraction of usable energy from the quantum vacuum remains a challenge. The zero-point field is extraordinarily stable. Tapping into it without violating the conservation of energy or the second law of thermodynamics is a problem still under exploration. Nevertheless, speculative theoretical models and experimental prototypes continue to emerge. In Frontiers of Propulsion Science, Mark Millis and Eric Davis document a range of approaches that include resonance cavities, magnetic flux modulation, and high-energy plasma field interaction, suggesting that under carefully designed conditions, controlled coupling with the zero-point field may be achievable. Zero-point energy, then, is not science fiction. It is a frontier of quantum physics that challenges the scarcity assumptions embedded in classical thermodynamics. It invites us to imagine a world in which energy is no longer mined, traded, or rationed, but accessed from the structure of space itself. If stabilized and scaled, it could mark the end of energy scarcity and the beginning of an entirely new phase of human and planetary development. Theoretical and experimental foundations. The concept of zero-point energy stands at the intersection of rigorous physics and speculative possibility. Its theoretical basis is rooted in quantum field theory and thermodynamics, yet its application remains uncertain and often misunderstood. Separating legitimate inquiry from pseudoscientific claims is essential in evaluating both its potential and its limitations. The notion of vacuum energy first emerged through the work of Max Planck and Albert Einstein, who described the electromagnetic field not as an empty background, but as a fluctuating system containing residual energy even at absolute zero. Planck introduced the idea that energy exists in discrete quanta and recognized the significance of zero-point fluctuations in blackbody radiation. Einstein and Otto Stern extended this insight by showing that zero-point energy could help explain the specific heat of molecular hydrogen, suggesting it was a measurable component of physical systems. As quantum electrodynamics matured, zero-point energy became mathematically inevitable. The ground state of a quantum harmonic oscillator cannot be zero due to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which prohibits simultaneous precision in position and momentum. This principle guarantees a minimal, irreducible energy state in all quantum systems. As David Bohm writes in Quantum Theory, the vacuum itself must be seen not as nothingness, but as an active medium saturated with fluctuating fields. Yet despite its theoretical robustness, the transition from concept to controllable technology has proven elusive. Part of the challenge lies in measurement. The energy density of the zero-point field is immense, but uniformly distributed and gravitationally neutral, making it resistant to direct observation. As Bryce DeWitt notes in The Global Approach to Quantum Field Theory, vacuum energy cannot be harnessed in the same manner as conventional energy sources unless a gradient or asymmetry is introduced. This challenge has not deterred researchers from exploring practical models. The Casimir effect, confirmed experimentally in the 1990s by Stephen Lamoureux at Los Alamos National Laboratory, offered concrete evidence of vacuum fluctuation forces between closely spaced conductive surfaces. Lamoureux's results demonstrated that the Casimir force could be predicted and measured with high precision, laying the groundwork for engineering-level exploration. Building on this foundation, contemporary research investigates ways to couple physical systems with vacuum energy through quantum coherence and resonance. Advances in nanotechnology and metamaterials have enabled the fabrication of structures that manipulate vacuum fluctuation spectra. As Michael McDonald and his colleagues note in recent studies on vacuum energy harvesting, certain engineered geometries can alter local field conditions in ways that may enable controlled energy exchange. Still, skepticism remains high in the mainstream physics community. Concerns center on thermodynamic constraints, the second law of entropy, and the potential for confusion with perpetual motion machines. Paul Davies warns in The Forces of Nature that while zero-point energy is real, extracting usable work from it without violating fundamental conservation laws requires mechanisms not yet demonstrated in practice. The risk is that public enthusiasm and pseudoscientific marketing obscure the line between valid research and speculative overreach. This tension is further complicated by reports from the fringe of aerospace research and defense analysis. The Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, partially declassified by the U.S. Department of Defense, explored exotic propulsion technologies, including those that referenced inertial manipulation and vacuum energy coupling. In UFOs and the National Security State, Richard Dolan documents military encounters with craft exhibiting behaviors suggestive of non-conventional energy sources, potentially implicating zero-point principles. Though such claims are not peer-reviewed, they fuel speculation that non-human intelligence may have already mastered technologies Earth-based science only now begins to explore. The idea of technological archaeology further stretches the boundaries of mainstream discourse. Advocates argue that certain unexplained artifacts, propulsion anomalies, and historical accounts may reflect ancient or extraterrestrial understanding of energy systems beyond combustion or magnetism. Jacques Vallée, in The Invisible College, suggests that some anomalous phenomena may involve controlled field effects consistent with theories of zero-point fluctuation manipulation. These ideas remain controversial, but have influenced private research into alternative energy systems. Despite the uncertainty, progress continues. Laboratories around the world investigate quantum vacuum phenomena not only for energy extraction, but for applications in quantum computation, space-time metrics, and information theory. The field remains young, speculative, and filled with unknowns. Yet, as physicist Harold Puthoff insists, it is premature to dismiss the possibility that new physics may allow stable access to energy fields that have, until now, remained latent and untapped. Zero-point energy occupies a liminal space in science. It is real in principle, elusive in practice, and deeply transformative in potential. Its study forces a confrontation with the limits of current understanding, while inviting a reimagining of energy not as a commodity to be consumed, but as a property of the universe to be harmonized and accessed. Applications of zero-point energy in a post-scarcity civilization. If zero-point energy can be harnessed as a usable power source, its implications extend beyond any previous energy revolution. It would not simply supplement existing infrastructure. It would render much of it obsolete, because zero-point energy is embedded in the vacuum of space and present throughout the universe. It offers a foundation for distributed, autonomous, and self-sufficient energy systems at every scale. In a post-scarcity civilization, the energy problem would not be one of generation, storage, or transmission. It would become a design question of integration, ethics, and intent. One of the most transformative applications of zero-point energy would be the creation of localized, decentralized energy nodes. Every home, vehicle, satellite, and spacecraft could contain its own independent energy source, eliminating the need for national power grids, fuel pipelines, or centralized utility providers. As Thomas Vallone suggests in Zero-Point Energy, the fuel of the future, such devices could operate silently and indefinitely, drawing ambient power from quantum fluctuations without combustion or mechanical wear. This would allow for off-grid communities, mobile architecture, and infrastructure in extreme environments including deserts, oceans, and polar regions. In transportation, zero-point energy could become the backbone of anti-gravity propulsion and inertial mass reduction technologies. As Hal Puthoff and his colleagues have argued in studies published through the Institute for Advanced Studies at Austin, zero-point field coupling may enable novel propulsion systems that bypass Newtonian mechanics through space-time manipulation or gravity shielding. In such a scenario, vehicles would not rely on chemical fuel or solar panels. They would draw energy from the vacuum itself, enabling interplanetary and even interstellar travel without dependence on resource stockpiles or energy payloads. Spacecraft powered by zero-point energy would no longer require massive boosters or fuel reserves. They could accelerate smoothly, maintain stable environments, and even support artificial gravity. As Eric Davis explains in Frontiers of Propulsion Science, propulsion systems based on vacuum energy interaction could radically reduce mass constraints, opening the door to long-duration missions and colonization of deep space environments. The limitation would no longer be distance or fuel, but purpose and coordination. On Earth, the environmental applications of zero-point energy would be equally profound. The ability to desalinate seawater, regulate atmospheric chemistry, and grow food through automated hydroponic systems would no longer be constrained by energy costs. Carbon-free power could support advanced climate engineering, including localized weather modulation and global reforestation efforts. Closed-loop cities could recycle air, water, and waste with zero emissions, creating biologically integrated habitats that restore ecosystems rather than deplete them. As Buckminster Fuller envisioned in Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth, the convergence of clean energy and holistic design would allow cities to function as living systems in equilibrium with nature. Zero-point energy would also support technologies that currently remain speculative due to their high energy demands. Matter replication, for instance, depends on precise control of atomic and subatomic structures, requiring energy levels far beyond conventional supply systems. If zero-point energy could provide sustained and dense power, then the molecular construction of objects including food, tools, and medical supplies could become routine. As Eric Drexler outlined in Engines of Creation, nanotechnology integrated with abundant energy would allow for self-replicating systems that could produce any material good from basic elements. Artificial superintelligence also depends on immense computational resources. Large-scale neural networks and real-time, global modeling require vast quantities of energy to operate continuously. In a post-scarcity context, zero-point energy could support the expansion of cognitive infrastructure without environmental cost. As Max Tegmark explains in Life 3.0, intelligence that is unconstrained by energy scarcity can simulate, forecast, and optimize systems at planetary scale, mediating economic, social, and ecological coordination through continuous learning. The combination of zero-point energy and automation would enable the construction of self-sufficient habitats in space, under oceans, or on other planets. These habitats could regulate temperature, gravity, and atmosphere using internal energy systems. As described in NASA's Space Settlement Design Study, energy availability is the limiting factor in habitat size, mobility, and independence. If that constraint is removed, the expansion of human civilization into new environments becomes an engineering challenge rather than a physical impossibility. Ultimately, the integration of zero-point energy into everyday life would reframe energy from a transactional resource to a background condition. Power would no longer be bought, rationed, or controlled. It would simply be present, like oxygen or sunlight, enabling creativity and complexity without the cost of extraction or the trauma of limitation. Such a shift would alter not only the physical structure of civilization, but also its psychological and ethical foundations. When power is no longer scarce, its use becomes a question of wisdom rather than access. Geopolitical and economic shifts. The advent of zero-point energy would not only revolutionize engineering and infrastructure, it would rewrite the geopolitical and economic frameworks that have structured global power for centuries. Today's world is built on the politics of scarcity. Fossil fuels are unevenly distributed across regions, making access to energy a strategic imperative and a frequent cause of conflict. With energy abundance made possible by zero-point energy, the strategic calculus of nations would fundamentally change. The politics of control would give way to the ethics of design. Much of the 20th and 21st centuries has been shaped by competition over oil and gas. As Michael Clare explains in Resource Wars, access to energy resources has underpinned military interventions, economic sanctions, and the foreign policies of major powers. The collapse of energy scarcity would eliminate the rationale for such conflicts. Nations would no longer need to control shipping lanes, protect oil fields, or secure pipeline routes. Petrostates whose economies depend on the export of hydrocarbons would face a forced reinvention or systemic collapse. As Megan O'Sullivan argues in Windfall, geopolitical leverage derived from fossil fuel production would evaporate in a world where every community can generate its own energy independently. This shift would also dismantle the global utility economy. Power grids, gas stations, refineries, and centralized electricity providers exist to distribute energy that is difficult to access or store. Zero-point energy renders that infrastructure largely obsolete. As Jeremy Rifkin notes in the Third Industrial Revolution, the ability to produce energy locally removes the need for hierarchical energy systems and introduces a distributed model based on autonomy and resilience. In such a context, the traditional utility becomes a legacy institution, increasingly irrelevant in the face of self-powered buildings, vehicles, and devices. The economic consequences will be no less profound. Energy costs are embedded in the price of virtually all goods and services. When those costs approach zero, the structure of pricing itself must be reevaluated. Manufacturing, transportation, and digital infrastructure all become dramatically cheaper to operate. This could catalyze new forms of value creation based not on scarcity or extraction, but on creativity, attention, and reputation. As Paul Mason explores in Post-Capitalism, when information and energy become abundant, markets lose their efficiency as allocation systems, and cooperative, non-rivalrous economies begin to emerge. The rise of post-energy currencies may follow. In a world where material goods can be replicated and powered without scarcity, value may migrate toward immaterial contributions such as trust networks, cultural capital, artistic expression, and scientific discovery. The shift would not eliminate commerce, but would change its foundation. As Mariana Mazzucato argues in The Value of Everything, rethinking how we define and measure value becomes essential in a landscape where production is no longer constrained by cost. Yet the end of scarcity does not remove the need for ethics. Unlimited energy can lead to excess just as easily as it can lead to liberation. The disappearance of cost does not guarantee wisdom in use. In fact, it may introduce new risks if abundance is not paired with maturity. As Buckminster Fuller observed in Critical Path, true wealth is not measured by accumulation, but by the ability to do more with less and ultimately to align power with purpose. With zero-point energy, society must cultivate a new ethos of intentionality. This ethos would include a redefinition of stewardship. Energy would no longer be hoarded or rationed, but consciously applied. Designers, engineers, and artists would hold the same ethical responsibility once reserved for rulers and industrialists. The decision to power a city, a network, or a machine becomes a spiritual and social act, not just a technical one. As Donella Meadows argues in Thinking in Systems, the behavior of any system depends on the values embedded in its feedback loops. If the feedback loop of energy becomes one of generosity rather than competition, the structure of civilization changes at its root. Energy abundance thus demands not only technological readiness, but philosophical evolution. The collapse of energy scarcity will not automatically create equality, but it will remove the excuse of limitation. What remains is choice. Zero-point energy opens a future in which energy can no longer be weaponized, monopolized, or withheld. The question it leaves is whether we can design our systems to reflect that new freedom. Risks, misuse, and philosophical implications. The arrival of zero-point energy as a usable power source would not be without peril. As with any tool of great power, the consequences of misuse could be catastrophic. While the promise of infinite, clean, decentralized energy invites visions of liberation and equity, the same capability could also magnify destructive potential. The removal of natural limits does not guarantee wisdom. It increases the urgency for ethical foresight. One of the most serious concerns is the weaponization of zero-point energy. Theoretically, the manipulation of vacuum energy could destabilize the fabric of space-time if pushed beyond safe thresholds. Although current physics places strong constraints on such scenarios, speculative models suggest the possibility of localized energy concentrations causing gravitational or temporal anomalies. As Nick Cook details in The Hunt for Zero Point, researchers working in classified military programs have explored propulsion and field manipulation technologies that hint at destabilizing effects if energy densities are not carefully controlled. Even if direct weaponization remains theoretical, the potential for geopolitical destabilization through asymmetric access is real. A nation or corporate entity with a functional zero-point energy generator would wield influence comparable to nuclear dominance in the 20th century. Another concern involves the use of unlimited energy without ecological restraint. Historically, new technologies have often led to overuse and exploitation rather than careful integration. If energy inputs into a system become infinite, the risk is not scarcity, but oversaturation. Technological systems that draw on boundless power could disrupt climate cycles, destabilize ecosystems, or induce runaway feedback in artificial environments. As Rachel Carson warned in Silent Spring, technological arrogance without ecological understanding can lead to devastating unintended consequences, even when intentions appear benign. With zero-point energy, these consequences could occur at planetary scale. The ethical implications of planetary engineering must also be confronted. Geoengineering, terraforming, and climate modulation may become not only possible but easy. Such capabilities will demand governance structures that transcend national borders and short-term interests. As Clive Hamilton argues in Earth Masters, the dawn of the age of climate engineering, once humans acquire the ability to redesign nature, the question becomes not only what can be done, but who decides and on what moral grounds. Zero-point energy offers the tools. It does not provide the answers. Beyond the technical and political risks lie the spiritual and psychological consequences of removing energy from the realm of struggle. Throughout human history, energy has been sacred. Fire, the sun, water, and wind have served as symbols of life, divinity, and transformation. Religions and mythologies across cultures have associated power with humility, responsibility, and awe. As Joseph Campbell writes in The Hero with a Thousand Faces, energy myths often serve as moral guides, reminding societies that power must be tempered by virtue. In a world where energy is infinite and invisible, that reverence could be lost. The removal of struggle from survival also raises questions about meaning. If energy is freely available, what becomes of effort, sacrifice, and mastery? Philosophers such as Viktor Frankl have emphasized the importance of overcoming hardship in constructing purpose. In man's search for meaning, Frankl argues that human fulfillment often emerges from suffering endured for a higher goal. While zero-point energy could eliminate many sources of suffering, it might also dissolve the narratives that have defined dignity and perseverance. The challenge becomes one of constructing meaning in abundance. This abundance also creates new ethical dilemmas. If anyone can create anything with enough energy, how are rights, responsibilities, and harms defined? The ability to replicate materials, modify environments, or power autonomous systems without limit may render traditional legal and moral frameworks obsolete. As Lawrence Lessig explores in Code, and other laws of cyberspace. Digital environments have already shown how technological architectures can bypass conventional governance. With zero-point energy, physical reality itself becomes programmable, raising questions about how we regulate power when scarcity no longer disciplines behavior. Despite these concerns, the risks do not argue against the development of zero-point energy. They argue for its responsible design. Power magnifies intention. As Amartya Sen contends in development as freedom, the expansion of human capability must be matched by institutional and moral evolution if it is to result in true flourishing. Zero-point energy offers the means. It will be up to civilization to supply the ends. In this way, the technology becomes a test not of engineering, but of consciousness. The maturity with which a civilization handles infinite energy may determine whether it evolves into a cosmic participant or collapses under the weight of its own power. As Jean Gebser describes in The Ever-Present Origin, true transformation arises only when external breakthroughs are accompanied by inner integration, when power is governed not by force but by presence. Zero-point energy may be the most powerful technology ever imagined. But power alone does not shape destiny. Only consciousness does. Whether this energy becomes a light of liberation or a weapon of collapse will depend on the values we embed within it. A day powered by zero-point energy. To imagine a world where zero-point energy has become the foundation of daily life is to imagine a civilization where power is no longer extracted but ambient, no longer purchased but assumed. This is not simply a world of technological novelty. It is a redefinition of how humans experience space, time, movement, and care. In such a world, the presence of energy is like the presence of breath, silent, continuous, and everywhere. A city powered by zero-point energy would no longer require overhead wires, power lines, or fossil fuel infrastructure. The skyline would not be punctuated by smokestacks or transmission towers, but by structures that seem to float, glow, and respond to human presence. Buildings would be embedded with local energy nodes that draw power directly from the quantum vacuum. These nodes would be as common as outlets are today, but would require no grid, no billing, and no external control. As envisioned by Buckminster Fuller in Critical Path, such structures could be organic in form, adaptive in function, and sustainable in materials, creating a seamless integration between nature and technology. Transportation would become quiet and effortless. Vehicles hover instead of roll. Streets are repurposed into green spaces, walking paths, and open forums as transit no longer requires friction or combustion. Commuters would not refuel, but recalibrate, aligning their vehicles to local energy fields. As Hal Puthoff suggests in his research on polarizable vacuum propulsion, anti-inertial transport powered by zero-point energy would eliminate the need for engines, tires, or rails. Mobility becomes a matter of intention and coordination, not cost or constraint. Inside the home, energy is not just available, it is intelligent. Rooms warm or cool based on circadian rhythms. Lighting adapts to mood, biological needs, and aesthetic preference. Appliances, tools, and computing systems operate without charging stations or cords. As described by Jeremy Rifkin in The Empathic Civilization, the convergence of ubiquitous clean energy and digital intelligence transforms homes into empathic environments that respond to human presence and enhance well-being. In this world, a child might ask their parent why people once paid for electricity or worried about gas shortages. The question would seem as strange as wondering why people once carried water from rivers to their kitchens. The culture of energy anxiety, power outages, utility bills, and rationing would become a historical curiosity. As Daniel Yergin chronicles in The Quest, the long struggle to secure and store energy has defined every modern economy. In a world where energy is background, those struggles become part of a distant past. The workplace is transformed. Factories run without emissions. Offices float on lakes or cling to vertical gardens, and data centers disappear into materials themselves. With abundant energy, computation becomes embedded in matter. Smart surfaces, holographic interfaces, and real-time global connectivity no longer require centralized data centers. As Mark Weiser predicted in his vision of ubiquitous computing, technology recedes into the fabric of daily life, becoming invisible and intuitive. Perhaps most radically, energy no longer mediates access to necessity. Food is grown in vertical gardens powered by light extracted from vacuum fields. Water is purified on demand without environmental impact. Medicine is synthesized at the molecular level using replication technologies. Each of these processes once depended on energy that had to be mined, refined, and distributed. Now they unfold quietly within homes, communities, and personal devices. As Eric Drexler imagined in Engines of Creation, when energy is no longer a bottleneck, molecular manufacturing becomes a question of intention, not capability. This abundance reorients human attention. Without the need to labor for energy, creativity becomes the new economic driver. Artists, educators, healers, and storytellers rise in cultural status. Daily life becomes more centered on meaning than maintenance. As Amartya Sen emphasizes in development as freedom, true freedom emerges when individuals have both the capability and the context to choose lives they value. A world powered by zero-point energy is one where that freedom is structurally supported. The atmosphere of such a civilization would be one of quietude and resonance. No engines roaring, no grids humming, no blackouts or surges, just ambient vitality, like a gentle hum beneath all things. Energy would no longer be something people think about. It would become a medium in which they live. In this way, civilization would return to a form of presence not unlike early animist cultures, where power was everywhere and sacred. Except this time, the sacred is supported by physics and the miracle is made of design. Closing reflection. Zero-point energy is not simply a technological innovation. It is a civilizational threshold. To harness the energy latent in the vacuum of space is to shift the human story from one of extraction and limitation to one of design and stewardship. Where energy is no longer a commodity, but a condition, the foundations of economics, politics, and culture are rewritten. The question becomes not what we can power, but what we choose to empower. This transformation alters our understanding of energy itself. In traditional societies, energy was sacred because it was scarce. The fire was tended, the sun worshipped, the harvest celebrated. As Lewis Mumford observed in Technics and Civilization, the shift to fossil energy disconnected culture from the rhythms of nature and reoriented it around control, acceleration, and industrial growth. Zero-point energy offers the possibility of returning to reverence, but through integration with the most advanced physics of our time. In this context, energy becomes sacred again, not because it is rare, but because it is infinite. Abundance brings possibility, but also responsibility. As Buckminster Fuller insisted in an operating manual for Spaceship Earth, the challenge of humanity is no longer whether we can survive with less, but whether we can thrive with more. With unlimited energy, the barriers to food, water, shelter, and health disappear. What remains is the need for ethical architecture, systems designed to uplift rather than dominate. Without such systems, abundance risks becoming excess and liberation risks devolving into chaos. The ethical dimension of energy abundance is not theoretical. It has already begun to emerge in debates over artificial intelligence, geoengineering, and automation. As Shoshana Zuboff warns in The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, technologies that promise liberation can also become instruments of control when developed without transparency or public accountability. Zero-point energy holds the same potential. It can decentralize power or concentrate it, depending on how it is governed. If energy becomes free but remains patent protected, It may replicate the very structures of exclusion it promises to dissolve. Even more profound is the shift in metaphysical orientation. When struggle is no longer required to survive, meaning must be found in other ways. Viktor Frankl wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that meaning is not given but chosen, and often revealed through suffering. In a post-scarcity world, the absence of suffering may become a test of maturity. Can we create meaning from freedom rather than from adversity? Can we design a civilization where creation, care, and reflection replace toil, hierarchy, and fear? Zero-point energy changes the conversation about destiny. As Michio Kaku suggests in The Future of Humanity, a civilization that learns to master the vacuum energy of space also becomes capable of traveling to the stars, settling new worlds, and participating in galactic culture. In this sense, zero-point energy is not just a source of power. It is a rite of passage. It is the test by which a species proves that it can handle divine tools without falling into self-destruction. That test begins now. The theories are in place. The prototypes are emerging. The cultural narratives are ready to shift. But technology is never the answer on its own. It must be integrated with moral vision, political wisdom, and spiritual humility. As Thomas Kuhn reminded us in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, new paradigms do not merely replace old ones. They require new ways of seeing. The advent of zero-point energy will require not only new institutions, but new perceptions of what energy is and what it means to use it. If zero-point energy becomes real in practice, then the most limited resource will no longer be fuel. It will be wisdom. What we choose to power will shape not only the landscape of our cities, but the interior architecture of our souls. In that choice, we will reveal whether we are ready to design a civilization worthy of its potential.
This is an authorized audio recording of The Age of Post-Scarcity, Volume 1. If you'd like to continue, the next chapter will be posted here on this channel. My other books are available on Amazon Kindle. You're also welcome to subscribe to receive notifications when new chapters are released.